Hello, I'm Jack Shagnon.
And I'm Henry Peden. We're here at Jerusalem Mill to introduce Harford County's 250th anniversary celebration. Jerusalem Mill is slightly older than the county itself, having been built in 1772. Our story, however, actually begins more than a century earlier.
In 1660, land grants on the southern tip of Gunpowder Neck, then located in Baltimore County, were being taken up by tobacco-growing colonists. With additional entrepreneurs arriving in the area, in 1712, the county seat was moved to a more convenient location in the village of Joppa. By 1768, this Gunpowder River port town was struggling as its harbor silted in, so the county seat was moved to Baltimore.
For settlers in this area, traveling to Baltimore was simply too inconvenient. Therefore, residents petitioned for their own political subdivision. The county's flag identifies the founding date of 1773, as the Maryland Assembly passed an act in December of that year to create Harford County. The county's actual establishment date, however, took effect in March 1774.
As the county's flag, as well as the 1973 Bicentennial Committee, recognized the county's authorization date, we will also adopt the year of 1773. The seat of Harford County was designated to be located in Bush, a hamlet along the Old Post Road at the head of the Bush River. Our narrator chronicles a number of significant events over this 250-year period.
At Bush, on March 22, 1775, the eve of the American Revolution, 34 courageous and duly appointed representatives met at the county seat and signed the famous Bush Declaration. This document supported the colonies against British tyranny more than 1 year earlier than America's Declaration of Independence. The signers fully recognized the possible consequences of their perilous act, ending the document with the statement, "At the risk of our lives and fortunes." By about 1780, the county had established 14 geographical hundreds, where it has been estimated the number of eligible voters in the southern hundreds totaled about 550, while in the north, the number had grown to more than 700. So when an election was held in 1782 to select a new location for a county seat, it's not surprising that the centrally located Scott's Oldfield, now Bel Air, was the winner, where the courthouse would be located. By 1775, tobacco represented 75% of the value of exports from the Chesapeake Bay. But repeated plantings robbed the soil of nutrients, forcing growers to migrate inland. One example of this was Scott's Oldfield, where the Old Field descriptor identified soil no longer suitable for growing the sought weed. To produce long-term sustainable crops, farmers transitioned to wheat that was ground into flour and exported out of the port of Baltimore. This in turn stimulated the construction of mills, such as the ones in Bush, Jerusalem Mill on Little Gunpowder Falls by 1772, and at Rock Run by 1801. The earliest identified Harford County newspaper is the Abington Patriot and Harford County Gazette that began publication in 1805 but survived only 2 years. In 1820, a Bel Air paper called the Bond of Union and Harford County Weekly Advertiser appeared, running for 4 years. Another Bel Air startup, the Independent Citizen, followed and continued 6 years. In 1857, the Southern Aegis appeared, which became simply the Aegis in 1923 and is still published today. The War of 1812 is most famously remembered by Fort McHenry's defense of Baltimore that gave birth to our national anthem. It will be a surprise to some that on May 3, 1813, the British had attacked and burned most of Havre de Grace, where one of the defenders was the celebrated John O'Neill. He and his compatriots were captured and held prisoners on a British ship, but through the efforts of his daughter Matilda and others, he was released. Both Chrome Hill Road and Rocks Chrome Hill Road are situated just south of the state park, near the area where several mines yielded chromite ore. These resources were discovered by Isaac Tyson, who leased land in that region, extracted the ore, and shipped it to foreign markets. A nearby facility, now Chrome Valley Mill, was outfitted with stamping equipment to separate the ore from dirt before being transported. Chrome compounds were used to produce the paint colors of chrome red, chrome green, and chrome yellow. Poole's Island was named for Nathaniel Powell by Captain John Smith, but over the years the name was corrupted to Poole. Located within the boundary of Harford County, it has Maryland's oldest still-standing lighthouse. In 1824, Congress appropriated $5,000 and John Donahue was engaged to construct a 40-foot-high tower. As part of his contract, he also built a dwelling for the keeper and a structure to house the fuel oil for the original 13 lamps in the lantern room. Where the Susquehanna River empties into the Chesapeake Bay, a large shoal gradually accumulated as ice flows gorged out sediment. This presented a serious hazard to nighttime navigation, so in 1827, a 30-foot lighthouse was built on Concord Point. Originally illuminated by oil lamps, in 1919 it was automated with acetylene gas and later electricity. After being decommissioned in 1975, it was acquired by the city and today is open to the public. The county's first major iron production facility was Harford Furnace, which began work in 1830 along James Run. It had been preceded, however, by 2 relatively short-lived operations, one by Stephen Onion in 1741 with a furnace near Joppa, and another one called the Bush River Iron Works that was in operation by 1758 but defunct by 1766. Iron furnaces and forges provided the raw material for the county's many blacksmiths. The Susquehanna Canal began at Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, and linked with the Tidewater Canal at the Maryland line, with a termination at Havre de Grace. This 45-mile-long barge waterway transported Susquehanna Valley products such as flour and coal to the Chesapeake Bay, making Havre de Grace a thriving transshipment port. This activity grew the wealth of the city, and this can be observed today by many of the town's magnificent houses and churches. The Lockhouse Museum there celebrates this heritage. The golden age of gunning for ducks in the upper Chesapeake Bay was between 1850 and 1930 and centered on an area of water known as the Susquehanna Flats. This shallow shoal near the mouth of the river grew celery grass, a favorite of migration waterfowl. During the hunting season, local residents, as well as out-of-state celebrities, flocked to Havre de Grace. 2 individuals that many will recognize were the Sultan of Swat, Babe Ruth, and Little Miss Sure Shot, Annie Oakley. When the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad reached Havre de Grace in 1837, the train cars were loaded onto a ferry and transported across the Susquehanna River to Perryville, where an awaiting locomotive pulled them northward. This worked satisfactorily until 1852, when the river froze solidly and the steam ferry was prevented from running. To keep the railroad operating, tracks were laid across the ice, and rail cars were slowly pulled across. 3 days after the attack on Fort Sumter, President Lincoln, on April 15, 1861, called for 75,000 Union volunteers. Some of these were sent south on the railroad to Baltimore and then to Washington to guard the Capitol. To prevent additional Union troops from arriving, 4 days later, Southern sympathizers brought the war to Harford County and burned the railroad bridge over the Little Gunpowder River. The bridge was rebuilt, but again in 1864, Major Harry Gilmore, with about 130 soldiers, set it ablaze again. About 1866, George W. Baker of Aberdeen began canning fruits and vegetables, initiating a new Harford County industry. He would introduce a new variety of corn called shoe peg that would bring fame to the area and earn Baker the title of Harford County's pioneer canner. Other producers quickly followed, and over time the numbers climbed to several hundred, with many adding the all-important crop of tomatoes. A few canners also offered string beans, lima beans, and sweet potatoes. In 1869, Martha Jane Cairns gave birth to a baby boy fathered by Nicholas McComas, who had refused to marry her. Subsequently, she carried a revolver into the Jarrettsville Hotel where he was dining and shot him dead. She went on trial at the courthouse in Bel Air, where the defense argued she was being prosecuted under bad law and the killing was justified. The jury agreed and she was set free. The mineral flint is best recognized as the material for arrowheads, cutting knives, and the spark igniter for flintlock rifles. Its principal industrial use, however, was flint powder that was mixed with white clay to improve the strength of household porcelain products such as dishes, vases, and bowls. Harford County flint was mined, fired in an oven, then ground into powder before being bagged and shipped to porcelain manufacturers. In 1874, a 100-acre tract of land along Baltimore Pike between Tollgate Road and Maryland Route 24 was the location of the first Harford County Fair. Later, it became the site for the Bel Air 1/2-mile-long thoroughbred racetrack that operated until 1960. The last owner was G. Ray Bryson, who died in 1957, signaling the end of horse racing in the county seat. In the village of Cardiff, just south of the Pennsylvania line, is a deep mine that yielded a green stone called serpentine that, when polished, was generally known as green marble. Prized for its beauty, slabs found their way to New York City, where they decorate the lobby of the Empire State Building, and also to Washington, D.C., in the John Adams Building of the Library of Congress. In Bel Air, serpentine was used around the lobby of the old post office molding, adjacent to the floor. The narrow-gauge Maryland Central Railroad reached Bel Air in 1883, connecting the town with Baltimore. It would later join with the York and Peach Bottom Railway, and after conversion to standard gauge in 1901, became the famed Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad, affectionately known as the Ma and Pa. It ran in Maryland until 1958, when the tracks between Baltimore and Whiteford were removed. It is still celebrated today by the Ma and Pa Heritage Trails that provide a glimpse into the past. Joel Hollingsworth and Sons operated a spoke and wooden wheel manufacturing plant along Winter's Run that burned in 1898. It was rebuilt and electrified by the installation of a water-powered 4-kilowatt dynamo, which illuminated the building and powered the equipment. Early on, wooden spoked wheels were used on automobiles, but a transition to steel quickly followed, and by 1907 the factory closed. The facility was sold to J. Alexis Shriver, founder of the Electric Development Company of Harford County, which became one of the county's early residential electrical suppliers. As early as 1865, George W. Baker of canning fame was operating a dairy farm and selling milk in Baltimore at 35 cents per gallon. With the arrival of the Ma and Pa Railroad in 1901, stations along the route were equipped with platforms onto which dairy farmers placed 5-gallon milk cans that were picked up early in the morning and transported to Baltimore. After being emptied and washed, an afternoon train returned them to the dairymen. earning the railroad the moniker of the Milky Way. In 1911, the Havre de Grace Hospital Association, headed by Murray Van Diver, acquired the Baker property, and 1 year later, on January 1, 1912, opened a hospital that later became Harford General. 3 decades later, in 1942, Dr. Willard P. Hudson purchased the Fountain Green Inn and converted it to a private hospital. To staff his facility, he advertised for nurses in the Sun newspaper. Falston Hospital opened in 1947, which was later transferred to the Upper Chesapeake Medical Center in 2001, now Upper Chesapeake Health, associated with the University of Maryland. In 1912, a state-sanctioned thoroughbred racetrack opened in Havre de Grace on the south side of the city. When the hooves of the pounding ponies were heard, it thrilled the gamblers. But for others, including the clergy, the track stirred up the dust of moral decay. Racehorse owners, trainers, and the betting public arrived by car and by train to be entertained and electrified at the Gras, seeing such famous horses such as Citation and Man of War. Despite some local opposition, the track ran until 1950, when the racing days were transferred to Pimlico. The earliest use of Harford County soapstone for carving objects was by Native Americans. Much later, in 1820, it was being used to construct stoves, as its surface did not get as hot as to cause serious burns. In 1827, a slab of soapstone was used as the floor of the lantern room for the Concord Point Lighthouse in Havre de Grace. In 1916, the Harford Talc Company leased land near the intersection of Dublin Road and Mill Green Road to extract soapstone. In 1933, the operation became the Harford Talc and Quartz Company, with some of its product being sent to Canada, where it was carved and polished into decorative objects. When America entered into World War I, the Army's ballistic testing facility was at Sandy Hook Proving Ground off the coast of New Jersey. With a need to test longer-range ordnance and weapons, in 1917, the U.S. government purchased a little more than 35,000 acres of land and 34,000 acres of water along the Chesapeake Bay. Some 13,000 acres of land was for Edgewood Arsenal, located on Gunpowder Neck. In 1923, Maurice Klein and his wife Sarah operated a general store in Falston, where their son Ralph learned the business. Ralph was drafted into the military, but after being discharged, he bought the Eli Tucker store in Forest Hill, and along with his wife Shirley and 3 sons, ran a profitable business. In 1977, a new nearby store was designed, and with continued success, Ralph and his sons opened a Bel Air store in 1983 and another one in Aberdeen. In 1989, Klein's expanded into the Festival Shopping Center and 3 years later opened at Riverside. Today, their widespread stores are managed by ShopRite. The Conowingo Dam across the Susquehanna River above Port Deposit impounds a 9,000-acre reservoir that generates electrical power primarily consumed by Philadelphia. Construction was started in 1926, and when completed in 1928, it became the largest dam in Maryland, and in hydroelectric power output, only second to Niagara Falls. To transport the water turbines and electrical generators to the site, a railroad line was constructed from Havre de Grace along the towpath of the old Tidewater Canal. Portions of the abandoned rails can still be seen today in the Susquehanna State Park. As the bicentennial of George Washington's birth was approaching in 1932, a commission organized a program to mark the roads that he had traveled. With a burgeoning interest in history, J. Alexis Shriver of Olney spearheaded an effort with the Historical Society of Harford County to erect roadside markers topped with the Great Seal of Maryland that recognized the county's rich heritage. Charles County followed, with the Maryland State Roads Commission launching a statewide program in 1933. In 1929, socialite and huntsman Harvey Smith Ledoux acquired part of a land tract called Widow's Care along Jarrettsville Pike, below its intersection with Falston Road. He set about transforming the property into terraced gardens with sculptured hedges, and in the process created what has been described as the finest example of topiary art in America. The grounds and his home, which contains a beautiful oval library, are open to the public for viewing and special events. On May 15, 1918, less than 2 decades after the Wright brothers had demonstrated powered flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the federal government initiated its first postal airmail delivery. A stamp cost 24 cents compared to mailing first class at 3 cents. By 1920, puddle-jumping airmail service from New York to San Francisco was operating with 13 intermediate stops. To celebrate airmail's 20th anniversary in 1938, a special stamp was issued that, in Harford County, could be canceled with a cachet featuring a dairy theme. With the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia at the onset of World War II, the owners of the Bata Shoe Company began to search for a new headquarters and manufacturing location. By 1939, they had purchased 2,000 acres on the shore of the Bush River that included a historic farm known as Sophia's Dairy, but was actually Sophia's Dowry. In January 1940, the company shipped its first shoes internationally, and in the 1950s peaked at 3,400 workers, declaring themselves shoemaker to the world. In the 1990s, however, with declining business, the company was sold and later redeveloped into an industrial park. In 1941, avid aviator Merrill Bowden opened a 157-acre airport near Havre de Grace on the south side of the Pennsylvania Railroad that was accessible off of Route 40. 5 years later, the facility was closed when he moved his operation near Aberdeen, which today is called the Harford County Airport, near the village of Eldino. The Falston Airport off of Record Road opened in 1960. The county's latest landing facility is the Havre de Grace Seaplane Port that handles about 30 operations per year. During World War II, the Army was producing artillery guns faster than mathematicians could produce the required range tables. To speed up the process, a contract was let with the Moore School of Engineering to produce an electron tube-based computer conceived and built by John Mauchly and John Eckert. It was delivered to the Army at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in 1947. Thus, Harford County hosted the ENIAC, the world's first electronic, numerical, integrator, and computer. Located along Bel Air Road near Falston, the Danaker Clock Company, from the late 1940s to 1969, and known worldwide as the Million Rutherford Company, made a variety of quality clock cases out of the best mahogany, cherry, and walnut woods available. The movements were made in the Black Forest region of West Germany and fitted by hand into each Danaker clock. Early in the morning of November 27, 1969, the main assembly building of the factory was completely destroyed by fire, bringing an end to this Harford County treasure. In 1942, at the onset of America's involvement in World War II, a dam across Winter's Run was built by the Army to supply emergency water to Edgewood Arsenal. After the war ended, the property designated as the Atchison Reservoir area was deeded to Harford County, renamed Harford Glen, and opened to the public in 1949. Today, it's managed by the county's Board of Education and known as the Harford Glen Environmental Education Center. One of the most scenic areas in Maryland is found in Harford County, where the meandering Deer Creek takes an abrupt turn north, making a loop to avoid the rocky ledges of the King and Queen seats. The stream then heads southward, traversing along a rock-strewn bottom, producing ripples that give adventurous tubers a sensationally bumpy ride. Less daring sightseers can enjoy the picnic areas or hike through the woodland trails. This wonderland is Rocks State Park that was established in 1951. The Harford Junior College, founded in September 1957, was originally located in the basement of the old Bel Air High School building with 116 students in attendance. As enrollment grew, in 1964 the college moved to its current location on Thomas Run Road, and by 1971 had been renamed Harford Community College. Today, with 20,000 credit and continuing education students and supported by a teaching staff of more than 100, undergraduates can pursue degrees in 6 different academic divisions. In the late 1950s, the state of Maryland was urged by John Gilman Paul to preserve the natural beauty and historic structures in Harford County along the lower Susquehanna River. The state completed a preliminary plan and between 1960 through 1969 acquired 22 properties, eventually bringing the park's land total to more than 2,500 acres. Within the park is the historic Rock Run Mill, as well as the Stepping Stone Farm Museum and abandoned locks of the Tidewater Canal. According to the Baltimore Sun newspaper, Harford Mall opened in October 1972 with 48 businesses. It featured 3 major department stores, Montgomery Ward, E.J. Corvette, and F.W. Woolworth. All of these major retailers have departed, including Sears, which closed its doors in 2020. Renovations during the 2006 to 2007 timeframe added Qdoba, Bonefish Grill, Five Guys, Vaccaro's Italian Pastries, and Red Robin. This 500,000 square foot complex is the only indoor shopping mall in Harford County. Since the establishment of the county in 1773, the administrative body consisted of locally elected commissioners. To enact new legislation, it was necessary to have the Maryland General Assembly pass a law. But with a 1970 population of 115,000, problems were arising faster than a timely resolution could be implemented. A referendum was held in 1972, and voters chose to establish home rule. It passed, elections were held, and in early January 1973, a county executive and legislative council were sworn in. One of the county's best-loved walking paths is the Havre de Grace Promenade that stretches from the Concord Point Lighthouse along the Chesapeake Bay waterfront to the yacht basin. Considered an enchanting walk on the mild side, visitors are captivated by the scenery that includes waterfowl enjoying the shoreline and the magnificent vista of the old Bayou Hotel, now condominiums. In 1993, the state acquired a 67-acre parcel of land along Falling Branch tributary that included Maryland's second highest vertical drop waterfall. Stream water suddenly descends 17 feet, creating Kilgore Falls that is accessible by a 1/2-mile trail through a pristine forest. 2 years later, in 1995, the county came into possession of Swan Harbor Farm along the Chesapeake Bay that has become a favorite wedding destination. The 3,600-seat Ripken Stadium hosted its first game on June 18, 2002, and is the home of the Aberdeen Ironbirds, an affiliate of the Baltimore Orioles. Cal Ripken Sr. was a longtime coach of the Orioles, and along with his son, Ironman Cal Jr., made their home in Aberdeen. The stadium is conveniently located off Interstate 95 and features a 3-tiered cafe behind home plate for patrons who want to enjoy a drink and dinner along with the ball game.
Harford Countyans have much rich and rewarding history in which everyone can take a full measure of pride. Visit and enjoy our wonderful parks. Trek our woodland trails. Be ever alert to historic markers. Visit our historic sites and peruse our county libraries and museums to dig deeper into our significant past.
For those of you who want to research additional information about the county's history, you are invited to visit Harford County's Public Library website. Go to hcplonline.org, hover over Research, click Local History in the drop-down box, then click Harford's Heritage Digital Archives. It loads in several seconds, allowing you to scroll to a collection that matches your particular interest.